Welcome to another Wargame review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we're taking a look at, for us at least, the long-awaited Combat Commander Pacific from GMT Games. Combat Commander Europe, one of the first Wargames we've played.
I love it. I love Combat Commander Europe.
It was one of our earliest ones. We've played that a lot of times.
More than most
other Wargames.
25 plus, I think.
It's one of your first ones. We
yeah.
We didn't have a whole library, so we played it a lot, right?
Yep.
And Pacific was out of print for ages. It was on the...
We could have paid like $200 and got a copy.
Yeah, it was nuts.
But
GMT recently did a reprint of it. So as the Combat Commander series goes, this is Volume 3. This Volume 2 is Mediterranean, I believe.
Which I have, and we've only played maybe 3 or 4 of those scenarios.
Yeah, so Combat Commander Europe it's Germans, Americans, and Russians. Then Mediterranean adds UK Commonwealth, Italians, and is it French?
Yeah.
Or was it Polish? There's a bunch of them. That's the problem.
It adds a bunch because some units are used for those nationalities the same.
Yes. So this is Volume 3, Pacific. So this is, there's a Commonwealth deck, Japanese deck, and then it's US, but it's a lot of US Marines, is how it's labeled. So it's this, it's a lot of the same core game, whereas...
It's all there where you're using the cards generally the same, the movement rules are the same, combat generally is the same, melee's not, but combat is general, fire groups are the same.
But with Europe and Med, basically the same game, you just get different armies and different scenarios. This one, they've really made some changes to it. There's some big changes in, like you said, how melee combat works. And then the other one is the rallying style mechanic that's been changed as well.
Yes.
And then
it's now called Revive.
Yes.
And it's you no longer have to roll. Pull a card. It's automatic.
Yes.
As long as you can activate a unit and do that.
But other than that, a lot of it is functionally the same thing, right? Using the same cards in the same way. Your map is the same size. Units very familiar and the same. Just different composition, and then the scenarios are Pacific ones. So we just did a heavily fortified Japanese beach, and then the Marines are trying to land.
Yeah.
It's going up to the top of a hill that's covered in jungle to knock out, some cannons and things like that. So you get a lot of that flavor in it, but the reality is, if you like Combat Commander, this is just more Combat Commander goodness,
more Combat Commander, yep.
So let's talk about those differences then.
Yeah.
So melee, this is odd, because I remember when we first played Combat Commander, melee was one of the, just always this funny interaction. We're like, let's get into melee.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, you're holed up in a building, and I'm just charging in. Yeah. We were very gung-ho about things, because
it's so deadly, right?
Yes.
If you hit, everybody else is, the enemy is eliminated.
Yeah, like, we both move in, and immediately you make some rolls. One side is not going to be there.
You play some cards.
Yeah. Or, worst case scenario, you tie, and you're both all dead. You just go to death. That's the worst. So, it's very much this, like, if you've got the advantage, it is a really good way to, like, force your way into an objective, and to really, like, you can't just sit there with a weak unit expecting to defend in the melee. The odds will be very much heavily against you.
Yeah.
In this one, however, the melee is not instantly resolved. The melee is done at the beginning of the allied player's next turn. So if, for example, the US Marines, they move into a position, or advance in, I apologize. You advance into melee.
Yep.
As the Japanese player, I get a whole turn to either advance out or to move out and to vacate that. I'm like slipping away as you're charging in.
Yeah, I don't like that.
So there was a lot of times in this scenario where the melees just didn't even happen because I was just running away.
It was every time but twice.
Yeah,
every time but twice, and we probably had 7 or 8 instigated melees.
At least.
Yeah.
At least. And that's really the only difference, is that timing of when the melee's resolved. And it makes a massive difference. Now, I happened to have the right cards for that, to be able to run away, but more often than not, you'll have at least one move or advance in your hand where you can at least, slip away one of the important melees, if not all of them. But it made a big difference. Melee was it was more of just a way to push me around and move my lines rather than going in for decisive action and like a killer blow. It was much harder to get that aspect of it done.
And I think from the tactical perspective, that's exactly it. It's more of a understand occasionally a melee is going to happen, but more often than not, it's not.
Yes.
But it's a way to kind of push you out of objectives or away from objectives or out of a key terrain. I used it almost every time you had a fortification of some kind, a foxhole, a pillbox, a bunker, or a trench.
Yeah.
So it's a way. I think why I am struggling with it and why I didn't like it is because I'm so used to the way it used to resolve, and I enjoyed that so much because it's a huge advantage. Because you got to remember, in Combat Commander, attacks are very hard.
Yeah, they can be.
You're firing usually at a 7 or 8, and you pull a card, and you're going to get somewhere between a 2 and a 12. Most of your attacks are going to be around 10 to 12. That's just kind of average. Maybe 13, 14.
Yeah.
Your defensive value is usually always higher because you were in fortifications or good terrain. So fire attacks are very, very difficult. They're challenging.
Yeah, they're definitely not a sure thing.
Yeah.
But when if you've got a good airborne unit going into melee, you're like,
I have a good shot.
I got an 8-box strength and you're a 4, like, I got this.
And furthermore, it's not just I'm breaking you.
Yes, you'll be
flipping your unit over, you're dead. And I think that those different subtle changes are probably what I'm struggling with. I want to go again. I probably will use melee completely differently.
Yes.
But I kind of miss the old way. And I don't know. I just need to get over it and just move on and play the game because the game's great.
In this particular scenario, what's interesting is that the Japanese, between the bunkers and the pillboxes, there's secret tunnels underground. So you can actually advance from like one pillbox over here to another one
across the map,
over there. And it's so where you're like, okay, I guess that's where those melee changes come in. It's like, well, we saw you coming, we like slipped away in the tunnels and like
which that makes a lot more sense.
That's what it's trying to do. It's just that's a really big difference, especially from how we play this game.
Yeah.
That you have to understand that's a new thing in this.
Yeah.
The melee is it's different, and how you have to employ it, you have to change how you think a little bit.
First off, the thing about Combat Commander, and I think the thing that a lot of people don't like, is the card luck.
Yes.
Either you're not drawing the cards you need when you need them. How many times do you draw 3 move cards when all you're hoping for is a fire?
Yeah.
And you can't draw a fire, or vice versa. All you need is one move card, and you can't draw it. And so there's a lot of card luck in it. There's a lot of luck with the way the cards are pulled.
Yeah, when you draw them.
Yeah, but they're a predetermined luck, which is something I kind of like. We've talked about that. You can kind of understand that, I just drew a bunch of my high numbers.
Yes.
Ooh, I drew an 11, a 10, and a 9 in the last 3 attacks. Oh, guess what? There's not many of those. Many more left.
And that's because this game, there's no dice rolling. You don't use a die to roll it. Otherwise, I'd lose every game because my dice rolling's horrible.
Right.
I'm able to do well in some of these scenarios because the dice are part
on
of
the
a
cards.
Closed system in the cards. They just got a little 2d6 value on the bottom.
Yep.
And that's what Grant's talking about where, I went through all my good cards. Now, I know I'm up due for some bad rolls.
Yeah.
Or I've had a bunch of bad luck. I know
They're
I'm
going to come around.
Good cards because the good roll values are either on the good cards.
Yeah.
So I'm either going to draw some nice stuff I can use, or I'm going to get some good rolls in combat.
Yep.
And there's some little swings in that, and that was funny. That my last deck before we ended the game, I defended so well on a lot of the attacks, but it was all my fire cards.
Yeah.
And I'm like, pulling all these like 10s and 11s, but I'm like,
they were all your fire cards.
I'm alive,
that you needed
but
to attack me.
I can't proactively do something.
Yeah.
So there's this whole aspect to that game.
Yeah.
But you're right. That's you either love it or I think a lot of people hate
I think a lot of people really hate it. But the reason I brought that up is I felt like melee is a way to mitigate some of that.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
And almost eliminate a lot of that luck fact. It's still luck because you're drawing a card. But the reality is, I typically don't move into melee unless I've got a good advantage.
Well, and because you can't, because it's so risky.
Yeah.
You have to wait till you've got good odds.
So it's got to be when I've got a nice leader and I've got a good, maybe a squad, and then I've got another team, like a 2 or 3 man team.
Yeah.
All of a sudden I look at my firepower value. I might have boxed, which adds another +1, or I might be elite. All of a sudden I might have a 12 or 13 to your 4.
Right. And then there's no cover bonus. So you're like, I got this.
So in those instances, it's a way to mitigate that luck. And frankly, advancing up and moving up without being shot to pieces to use melee is very, very challenging.
Yeah.
So that's why I struggle with that concept. And I'm just going to be frank with it. That's something I've struggled with.
It's a paradigm shift in this one.
I need to think differently and understand that's going to happen. Now, what I did the end of the game, and it actually ultimately ended up backfiring on me,
Yes.
I initiated 3 melees all at once.
Yes.
And I thought to myself, you've only got 4 cards. 2 of these are going to get through.
Yeah.
And I was hoping that you would pull bad luck, and I'd be like, I'm going to win at least 1 or 2 of these, because I had pretty good odds.
You had very good odds, yeah.
What ended up happening, though, I pulled literally back-to-back a 3 and a 3.
And it's funny, because I pulled a 6 and a 6.
Yeah, which wasn't great.
No, I pulled
enough
a 6 and I was
to-
like, oh crap, I'm dead.
Yeah.
And you rolled worse than me on both of
Yeah.
those, and I scored like 8 points off of that.
Yeah,
And it was
and that was kind of the pendulum that swung the game in your favor. But once again, the old game, the old system, now in Pacific, I used to use that as a way to mitigate some of that difficulty.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I dislike it. I just need to think of it differently.
It's very different.
So it's more of a word of warning for those who are combat commander aficionados. If you pick this up and you're trying to play it, understand that's going to be a little different.
Well, it's
going to be a little
though.
different.
You'll be familiar with the game, but there's enough nuance where you
That
can
it makes
think
it
about
feel
some,
fresh.
some things differently.
Yep.
The other big difference is the rally mechanic, which, like you said, has been changed to the revive mechanic. So before, when you'd do rallies, you have to roll their morale value or less.
Yes.
And
So if you had a 7 morale
be
value, you have to
unsuppressed.
roll a 7 or less. That's why a good leader adding to that morale value, making it a 9, makes it a better attempt. In this one, it's a revive 1, 2, 3. I think I even had a 5 in there.
The card literally says revive and has a number 1 through
revive
5.
X.
And you just
automatic.
spend that to automatically remove a suppressed marker or flip someone
them.
over. And I think it used to be that you couldn't rally someone who was adjacent to an enemy either.
Yeah, that's something I'd have to look at. Maybe that was the
that's
case.
True. That might not be, but I feel like that's true. And in this one, I didn't, at least in the rules, didn't see that same stipulation. It was just...
So that's a different... Also, it's going to require a little bit of a paradigm shift, because once again, you work so hard to get you broken, and in the old game, it's like, oh, it's going to be hard for him to revive that guy, because now his morale's down to a 6, and it's going to be hard to pull under a 6, but now it's like, oh, you just had a revive 3, and all that work I just did was undone.
Yes. Yeah.
So it is a paradigm shift, and I think that's something that you got to keep in mind.
Yeah, you're looking at the same game through a slightly different lens, right? So there's some nuance to it, and I like that. I also like exploring the new decks of cards.
Oh, yeah.
I've always liked that. When you get the big box expansions with a new deck of cards, how that deck plays is always such an interesting journey to me, where you're like, oh, I've got a bunch of this stuff, and I have, like, not much of that stuff. And so figuring out where your strengths lie and how to utilize your cards between orders and actions, that stuff's really interesting. So I always have a fun time with this.
Yeah.
What's nice in this one is that they give you a breakdown of your decks. I saw that and thought, that's nice.
And I was remembering in Combat Commander Europe, they have these little cards that actually have that breakdown there.
I've never paid attention to that before. So seeing it in the rulebook, I'm like, oh, this is nice to look at before I even dive into it.
So they did have those on those little black cards. But understand, that's one thing I've talked a lot about when I put these strategy articles together that I did many years, like 3 years ago. You know, understanding your opponent's deck, understanding what has kind of come out. There's 50 cards?
72.
72. I mean, there's a ton of cards. You can't know them all. But understanding that, oh, he just did 5 fires in the last turn, which happens sometimes.
And there's 20 in the deck.
And there's only 8 more, or 7 more,
like, okay.
9 more left. Understanding that, he's going to have trouble getting a fire, so I can act. So you're kind of gaming the system, and that's the way I play these games sometimes, because
that's part of it. Yeah,
I think in real life, hey, that squad over there just fired for 5 consecutive minutes.
They're going to run out of ammo and not do anything.
Their gun barrels are overheated. They're running out of ammo. And, hey, I can be a little more aggressive. Now, that's a risk. It's always a risk.
Yes.
Because you may have a card in your hand. But I enjoy that concept of kind of counting cards, kind of understanding the tactics and strategy that's going on. And I like having that manifest because it's something I study as we play. And if we were going to play this 5, 6, 7, 8 times in a row, by that 6th, 7th game, I'd have it down and I'd be like, oh, we're going to do this. And I still suck at Combat Commander. I feel like I never win anymore.
Well, this is the only game I can win because I don't actually roll the dice.
Yeah, it's fun though.
And that's
why
very,
very cool.
I also like closed system dice rolling like that. And the cards, Fields of Fire has that. There's a number of games. I think Tank Duel has that as well.
It's very cool. That's a great innovation.
It means that my luck will come up at some point.
Yes. Luck will always change.
I won't just roll ones every time.
Yeah. Although, in this play that we did, I really had bad draws. I had a lot of bad draws.
I felt like I had good ones.
Yeah, I broke my radio early on. So the ability I had to request airstrikes and offboard artillery was like gone, because I rolled a 2 and wasn't able to get a radio. And it's just, that's part of Combat Commander.
And then the domino effect is that all of those asset request cards
just stack up in your hand.
Now can only be used for like one thing.
Yeah.
And
I think you have like 2 or 3 asset denied cards, which basically, asset denied, what's the number? 3.
Yeah. That's
an ability I have to break one of your weapons.
Stuff, yeah.
And it's like kind of the finger of God reaching over and jamming the gun. But it happens. Gun jams happen. But yeah, not being able to use those cards really gummed up my hand. Now, luckily, if you remember Combat Commander cards, there's an order at the top that you can, it's move or fire or advance or call in an asset. In the middle, there's typically an event or an ability.
Yeah, it'll have an action and an event.
Right, so it'll...
a sub-thing you can do.
Add +2 to a fire attack in an adjacent hex, or +2 when you're firing a mortar or a machine gun. And then at the bottom, you've got the random event.
Yeah,
like sniper and, random hex generator, and then little random events that create all kinds of
chaos,
fun stuff. And then even around the dice... there's...
That's the sniper...
Disperse, time, where you move the time track up. So the cards are multi-use cards, and it's really cool. Each card almost can be used for something. There's almost no card ever that you can't use in any way, shape, or form, but it's about managing that deck. It's about managing that hand.
You might only be able to use it for a very limited amount of things, but you'll be able to get something out of it. I think I had one card where it was... I think it was an asset request card, which I couldn't use because I was denied already.
Right, which was funny.
And it had the action was command confusion, so I couldn't do anything on it.
Right.
That was one card in the whole game where I was unable to use it.
Yeah, and you were the defender, a little bit different situation than me as the attacker. I also really like those command confusion cards. They're annoying as heck. They build up in your hand. Some of them you can't do anything with them. They're literally just a dead card in your hand. But some of them have an ability and you can do stuff. So managing those asset denied or asset request cards, that's a big part of this game as well. And then sometimes not shooting your wad off totally.
Yeah.
Holding back, understanding that, hey, I want to be able to do an op fire when Alexander decides to move away from my melee.
Yeah.
Because guess what? He's going to get out of that bunker and be in the open, and I'll have a better shot. So I started doing that more at the end of the game. Still didn't hit. I felt like that was the
time you moved into melee, and I was like, oh, I've booby-trapped it. I'm going to mime myself, even though I was in there as well.
Right.
Just, neat little bits like that also
Yeah.
make the game, have some spice and fun as well.
So the big knock on Combat Commander that others have, I don't have it because I understand what the game is. That randomness, the card drawing, but that's part of the confusion and the fun.
The thing that I've heard is that the game plays you, right? You can only do what your cards dictate. And there's usually
but you can...
optimal things to do with your cards.
Yeah, but I think that's a myopic view.
I understand it to an extent, and this game isn't for everyone, right? There's tons of tactical games where you got all the freedoms or whatever you want, but this one has fun. It's
just fun.
It's enjoyable.
Yeah, it's very enjoyable.
You get fun stories out of the crazy things that happen as well.
I used to love to do our AARs on the blog, but man, it can be really cumbersome because you got to take a picture of this and that, and it's
and so much happens in the game.
I mean, we played how many decks? We started at 4 and went to 12. That was 8 times that either our decks ran out or we pulled a time card.
Yeah,
that was a long game. We played for about 3 hours.
Yes.
But I'll be honest, 3 hours of fun. I had a good time. Sometimes it was frustrating. Sometimes I wanted to rip the cards up. Sometimes I wanted to reach across the board and flick your unit across the map. But then sometimes I was like, yeah, it worked. Great. Let's do this. It's just fun. Just a fun game.
What I'll do is I'll show you the map, and then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. So here's a look at one of the maps. These are... what is it? Are these 22 by 17 maybe maps? But all the maps are this size. I think you get 6 or 8 of them in the box, and they're dual-sided. So it's probably only 6 because there's 12 scenarios. But you get this is the end of the game, and this was a fairly large game as well. There's a good number of units on here. I feel like a lot of the time you don't have this many markers on the board, but this was one where all the Marines had to land on the beaches and come up and attack a lot of fixed Japanese emplacements. So I wanted to show you this one because this is a very Pacific style scenario, right? This is the kind of thing that people look for in this game. So the game itself, if you've played Combat Commander, you'll be very familiar. Each faction has a deck. So we've got a US Fate deck and we have a Japanese Fate deck. Each of these is 72 cards, and you'll have a hand size dependent on the type of posture that you're in. So, for example, in this one, this was an invasion scenario. So the US player had 7 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. A hand of 7 cards, and they were able to play 6 orders from those 7 cards. So you'd always have a card left over if you didn't use it for anything else. The Japanese had 4 cards, and they were able to play 3 of them. So what that effectively means is you have a lot more options as a US player. You're a little bit more hamstrung as a Japanese player in a situation like this. You just don't have the tactical variability. You're stuck in your bunkers and pillboxes just trying to shoot what you can see in front of you, basically. Let's say it's the US turn. You got all these cards, you can play any of them you want to, but the units on the board can only be activated once. So you might have a fire order. This card allows someone to shoot. You might have a command confusion, which command confusion does nothing. You might have another fire order. Let's see, I can pull my fire orders. Okay. You might have a move card that enables you to move activated units. I've got another move, and I have an asset request, which does some special bits and pieces. So when let's say you're going to activate some guys, you want to move them. So you just play your move card down and discard it, and you might look at your units on the board and say, I'm going to move. I'll get rid of that. You can either just pick a unit, let's say, we're going to activate the BAR Marine squad, and they're going to move. Each unit has some values on them, and those values are as follows. 6, 7, 5 along the bottom, and then an 8 in the top corner. So the 6, that's their firepower value, it's their attack value. 7 is their range, how far they can shoot in hexes. And then 5 is their movement factor. And then the 8 at the top here, that's their morale value. It's effectively a defensive factor, and was also used in the old game. You'd have to roll that or less to rally them. In this game, not the case. So basically, if you wanted to move, you got 5 movement points. And so you consult your little terrain effects chart, which you've conveniently got off to the side. And the terrain effects chart says how many movement points you have to expend to move through different terrain types. So if we want to move it to open, it's just 1. So we're going to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can move 5 spaces to here. If we moved all through clear terrain. If you wanted to move into some grass, that costs 2 movement points. So now you're looking at 2, and then we're going to move 3. And then to move into the jungle costs 3 to move into. Well, we've used 3 of our 5. I don't have enough to move in here. You can't make change. So that's basically how movement works. Very simple. You just move based on the type of terrain that you're looking at. If you wanted to shoot someone, we're going to look at our fire card. It says order fire. So we've got a fire at the top. So you can either move or you can fire. You can only do 1 action per turn. So let's say we didn't move. Let's say we were just going to shoot. Let's get ourselves some enemies here. Let's get this guy off the board. Okay. So these guys can see each other. He's got a 6 firepower. We're going to try and shoot him here. So what you do is you just take your 6 firepower and you roll a die. There's no dice rolls, you just flip a card. And the card has 2 dice symbols at the bottom. In this one we rolled double 2s. But you might roll something like a 7, he says. Gotta get into focus. Oh no! There you go. So there's different numbers on each one, and so it's a closed system. That's what we were talking about. You might roll boxcars, you might roll snake eyes, but at some point your luck's going to change. So what happens is, I rolled a 2, I rolled 4. So 6 plus 4 is 10. So you got a little nice marker on a track down here with your attack total market as a 10. And then the defender uses their 8 morale value, and they roll a die, and they rolled a 5. So they rolled a 15. The defense is greater than the attack, so there's no effect. But what happens is, I rolled a sniper, so the sniper's going to go off. Anytime you get the dice that are in a little red ring like that, you do that thing immediately. It pauses play and you do that. So we're going to roll a sniper, and the sniper, you consult the random hex down here, and so the random hex is H6. So we consult the map, we look at H6, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H6, and I may, in this hex or any adjacent hex, break a unit. So if there was an enemy unit, I'd break him. If it was a friendly unit, I wouldn't bother. So in this instance, nothing happened. But you have to look anyway. What that does is it adds randomness to it, but it also chews through your cards, which means that timer that's naturally in the game is going to go that little bit quicker. Now the Japanese, on their defensive roll, they rolled an event. You can see that down here. So we flip another card, and in this instance, we consult this event line right here. Just down here at the bottom. And this event says, suppress 1 unit in a hex with less than 1 cover. Less than 1 cover is 0 cover, because we can do basic mathematics. Yay. So basically, you look at the cover chart, and looking for anything that says 0. So anyone who's in grass, or who's in the open, they'll be eligible to be broken or suppressed. So we're going to suppress the guy who's in the grass. He has 0 cover. We take a little suppressed marker. And so even though the US player was trying to shoot them, it's effectively, we did a little bit of return fire and we suppressed them. Or they stretched themselves too thin and now they're combat less effective. And that's the kind of chaos that happens in this game. I tried to attack, did not go well. Indeed, I actually hurt myself a tiny bit. So the little suppression marker, you'll see here, it's -1 to all of your stats. And there's a little, says WPN with a little no marker there. What that means is if you had a weapon attached to you for example, like a heavy machine gun, you would not be able to carry that anymore. So you either have to sit there and unsuppress yourself so you can pick up your weapon, or you got to move on and just leave it on the beach. But that's how you do an attack. Now what you might do next time, because that was such a pathetic attack, you might look at finding ways to augment your attack. So you might do a different attack with a different guy, because you can't use the same guy twice. But we have this card, which says Sustained Fire as its action. And it's add +2 when firing a mortar or machine gun. If the fire attack roll is doubles, you have to break that weapon. So we're going to pick a unit with a weapon, and we're going to attack. Let's say we got these guys over here. We got some rifle marines, and they've got a medium machine gun. And they're going to attack these guys. Well, the nice thing is we're also stacked with a leader. So when we do our fire attack, we're going to activate the leader, and he's going to create a fire group with himself. And the leader has this leadership value that's in a hex. And that hex is a 2 value on this guy. He says, Cumin. Nope. But, well, I promise it's a 2. He's got that 10, and he's got 2. This is Captain Van Dyke. Yes. Okay. So that 2 in the hex, you add that to the attack value. So he's at this machine gun, which is normally a 6, is now an 8. The captain only has small arms fire, so he's only got a 1 range. So he can't contribute anything to the attack other than his command value. If he did, if he had longer range, or if this guy was adjacent, you'd be able to add a +1 for every other guy who's part of the attack. So right now we're just an 8, but because we're doing our sustained fire, we're +2. So currently we're at 10, and then we're going to roll, and I rolled a 10. That's the kind of attack that you're looking for. Get yourself a nice big fat 20. So this guy's an 8 out in the open. He's now going to roll, and he rolled a 5. So the attack is greater than the defense. That breaks the unit. So now he's broken. His stats are much worse, but the Japanese rolled another event. So because they rolled an event, we flip another card, and this event says, your opponent must reveal one of his secret objective chits. Victory points are done based on these little secret chits that you randomly draw at the beginning of the game. And on the back of them, it has a victory point value for a given printed objective hex. So it's a way for you to get some information. Oh, he's going to try and go there. Or, oh, that one's worth a lot of points for him, so I got to concentrate on taking that away. Again, the event's quite random, and just to add some different dynamics to the game. But that's moving, that's attacking. The new stuff that's in here is we have something called a Revive 1. When you do a Revive 1, you can either freely unsuppress someone, or you can freely unbreak someone. This is a Revive 1, so you can only do one of those two things. So he's going to remain suppressed, we're going to unbreak this guy. There's Revive 3, 4, 5, you can do a whole bunch of stuff. That's very different, because before, you would have a rally card, and you'd say, I want to rally this guy. He's an 8, -1 for the suppression, he's a 7. So I'd have to roll a 7 or less on here. Luckily I did, he would be unsuppressed at that point. But that's very random. So they've made that a bit more fixed and a bit more safe to do that. So that's a big change that they made. And then the other big change was with melee, where you move in and something becomes a melee hex. You have to advance in there. It becomes a melee hex. But then the Japanese player has a whole turn to slide out of there. But if the Japanese move in on their turn, it happens at the beginning of the Allied player's turn. So the Allied player wouldn't have an opportunity to slide away. It's a very interesting choice that they've made there, with how slippery and sneaky the defenders of these atolls were, I guess. So that's kind of the core of the game. It's about moving your forces, making fire groups with contiguous units so you can get really high firepower. So for example, this guy's an 8 with his HMG, +2 from the commander, that's 10. But if I have a bunch of guys contiguously joined on. I can activate all of these as long as they're within range of the enemy. Let's put the little enemy guy right here. All these guys can shoot. So we're at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, plus a die roll. That's much, much better than just like attacking with a 6, right? But it uses up a lot of your units. So you've got to make some choices about how and when to make fire groups, moving and advancing, taking objectives, and eliminating enemy units. That gives you victory points as well. And once you go through your decks and hit time cards, the game is going to end and you total victory points at the end. So that's basically how it works. What we'll do is we'll wrap up with a few final thoughts. So that was a look at the map. This will slide alongside your Combat Commander games that you've got in your collection already very nicely.
Yeah. Well, and it slides alongside, but it also differentiates itself from the other 2 volumes and really kind of gives you a different experience. Yeah. I think that's key to understand. This is a little bit different experience.
Yes. And I enjoy this one a lot. Thematically, it's enough of a change from Europe as well. Mm-hmm. Like Europe, it's like, here's a village, fight over these buildings, here's this and that. Here, it's different enough. The unit compositions are refreshing. The decks are nice and different. The other big difference that they've got in this one is there's scenarios where the Japanese are under bonsai, and they have a bonsai charge card where it like activates everyone, and it'll just like run and do stuff. So there's some neat bits and pieces to the game as well. I think the game has 12 scenarios in it.
Yeah.
So you get a good chunk of play out of this.
There's also the New Guinea Battle Pack, which I think has another 12.
And that's
not in this box.
For this.
Yep, you have to buy it, and I'm not sure it's in print anymore.
But it's available if you were so inclined.
But we've played some of the airborne Battle Pack scenarios that I have.
Yes.
I bought that. I've never bought any of the other ones. I would love to. Would love to own all of them. But we played a couple of the airborne scenarios because I like airborne. They're fun.
Yes.
They're fun.
But if you like Combat Commander, there's no reason you wouldn't like this.
Yeah.
This one gives you something a little bit different, which is nice. Always enjoy something that's slightly familiar, right?
Yeah.
Picking up the rules and doing all the stuff felt very normal. But you get cool things like the infiltration boxes.
That was cool. We didn't talk a lot about that. That was really a neat mechanic.
Yeah, it's just, I can save a couple guys off map, and then they, spring up on the board. And in most of the scenarios, there's, 2 or 3 places where they could. Yeah. In this one, there was, 8. So I could kind of pop up anywhere, because it's very heavily, pre-planned defenses and stuff.
And that's really a cool element, because I had to worry about that.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, and it's a game, you had to place those out on the board, and I knew where those were. So I understood, okay, he can pop up to my right, and I just got to deal with that. Yeah. You only did it one time, because you only put... No, you did it twice.
I did it twice, once early on,
You only put a couple units. I think you can ultimately do, was it 3 units?
Yeah.
But you didn't have a ton of units.
You could put any number you wanted in there.
Yeah.
But, that's like you said, the choice is I have so few starting units in this scenario that putting a bunch in there to spring surprise attacks is a very, very heavy commitment.
Yeah.
And so, do I want to do that? Because you have to draw a card to be able to pull those guys out.
Yeah.
So then you're waiting on cards, and it can be very dangerous. So, even setting up some of these games, there's a little mini game within that, which is fun once you know the game and you know how to do things.
Yeah.
I remember our first few games where it's like, you set up here, and it's like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Well,
and you set up horribly.
I still struggle with it. The one thing I understand and get down is the commander, distribution. I feel like I've got that, but the rest of it, I'm like, okay, what do I really want?
Yes.
What do I want to do here? These machine guns are going to slow my dudes down, so I don't want to put those with units that have faster movement. So it's a matter of
but if you put them on the guys with the slow movement, they're now slugs.
Yeah, they're really slow.
They'll never move.
So there's a lot of elements. I think setup is always one of the more challenging parts of this game for me. A good setup. The other thing I really did like, we talked about the changes in Melee. We talked about the changes in Revive.
Yeah.
They added a new card called Reconnoiter.
Yes.
And I really enjoyed that card. So Reconnoiter is you have to activate an unsuppressed, unbroken leader who is in line of sight of an enemy unit.
Yep.
So he can't be blocked by, woods or hills or whatever. And what you do is you pull a card off the top of your deck, and you have 3 choices. You look at it, you can keep it, put it in your hand, so it adds a card to your hand.
Could use, yeah.
Then you can use it the same turn. You can put it back on top of your deck because you may be like, oh,
I need that next turn.
I need it next turn. Or you can discard it.
You discard it? Or do
you put it on the bottom of your deck. And I looked at it after you did that a couple turns. I'm like, yeah, you were supposed to discard it.
My bad.
So an very interesting concept that I think used situationally can really make a difference.
Yeah, it's interesting because that is quite a gamey mechanic.
It
really
is, yeah.
I felt like, it's like Commands and Colors a little bit, where you get that scout, where you kind of draw 2 and get rid of 1. Keep one. It's a way to manipulate your cards.
It is, yep.
Which is a very gamey thing to do.
Well, but to me, it's thematically well integrated. It's Reconnoiter. You're using a leader. You don't have many leaders, and you use him, and he's done.
But it's nice. I love that.
It's cool. It's like you're looking at the battlefield, and you're like, oh here's a weakness.
Let's not do that, or let's do that.
So you pull a card, and that represents that identification of a weakness or an advantage you have. I really enjoyed that. Thought that was a really cool addition.
Yeah, you do it early on in your turn, because then you've got I can then...
Yeah.
It's either a whole other order I can do, or, oh, sweet, it's got a nice action, and I can augment something I was already going to do. Yep. It's neat. I do really like that one as well. I thought that was cool.
And it's really cool because let's say I had, those cards, ambush cards, that give me +2 bayonets or ambush where I break one of your units in a melee. Melee is, you're still going to run away. But, imagine I had a couple of those cards. And I had a good setup, but I just didn't have that advance card. So I played Reconnoiter. I look at the top card of my deck, and I'm like, oh, yeah.
Nice.
Advance. So then I've lined up my cards, what was in my hand with a new card I've drawn. Really like that. It changes the way that functions. And I thought that was slick.
And at the same time, it's a very challenging decision to make which leader to do that with.
Absolutely.
It activates the leader and uses them. So you're like...
So he can't do anything next the rest of the round.
Group. He can't do any of this other stuff you might want him to do. So you're like... You almost designate one little guy as he's a little recon guy, and he's going to just do that.
And I did have my leader over here that was kind of not doing a whole lot, and I kept using him for that recon. I did that 4 or 5 times during the game, and really was nice until you picked him off and... You broke him, and I never was able to get him revived.
It's a neat little extra. I do like that one as well.
So, this game has added some new tricks to it. So don't think you're just getting more Combat Commander. You are getting more Combat Commander, but you're getting an additional element, some more depth. And I'm going to say it. Chad Jensen is a genius. The late Chad Jensen. These games are fantastic. They're very playable, very understandable, yet they capture all the elements of this theater of war during World War II.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these scenarios were designed by Kai as well.
Yeah. I imagine the two of them would sit around and play this hundreds of times.
Yeah, a lot of them by
they usually
John
are.
Foley. Yeah. But yeah, it's a game where... So, I enjoyed this. I enjoy Combat Commander. Yeah. I've heard people say, this is better than Combat Commander Europe. I would say they're equally as...
Well, they're just different.
Yeah, the differences are enough where I'm like, I would play either one equally. Yeah. I don't know if I prefer one over the other.
So here's a question. Who's asking you that? Are they a Marine?
Well...
Are they a Marine? And who's... that may be part of it. People love playing the Marines. Just like I love playing those airborne units in Europe, there are people that love playing the Marines. They've waited for this, and
for sure.
I love playing the Marines too. It was a blast. But the Marines are elite fighting units, and they like this better because of that? Of Question mark?
No, well,
know?
it's, you had the first 2 iterations in those battle packs, then they came out with this, which is the first one where they started to make some, what I'm sure they would call improvements.
Yeah,
but they're changes.
Changes.
And some people think they're great improvements, and probably some people like, take it or leave it, doesn't matter one way or the other.
See, I think they're great improvements, but the nostalgia of Combat Commander
That's
Europe
probably fair.
and the way we have always done those games with Melee, I really would say I prefer Combat Commander Europe. So that's my opinion.
Right.
Take it or leave it.
Yeah.
Lump it or hate it.
Is it better or worse? Yes
No.
or no? But do you like the other one more because we've played it more? Probably.
This is not worse.
No.
But I just love Combat Commander Europe because of some of those things that we've already talked about. This is also, what is this? Is it the 3rd printing? No, it's just 2nd printing.
Just the 2nd printing, yeah.
So it's taken a while to get the 2nd printing. This came out in 07, 08?
08.
08?
Yep.
So what's that? 12 years. Yeah.
Did this come out this year? Or
Yeah, it was. I think it was earlier this year. Okay. Maybe it was last year.
Time stands still at the moment. So,
but if you're interested in this, if you like Combat Commander, you need to get this. You really do.
Yeah.
Because it's different enough. You're going to enjoy it. But
yeah, I would agree. I enjoyed this a lot. I am inclined towards the theme.
Yeah.
The scenarios, some of the scenarios do have Commonwealth units in, like Chindits and stuff.
Anzac.
That's always interesting and fun to play around with as well. So yeah, I would highly recommend this game if you like Combat Commander.
Oh yeah.
It's a whole other big box game. What's not to like about that, frankly? I did not know there was an expansion to it though, the little battle pack.
Yeah, it's called New Guinea.
So yes,
the battle pack New Guinea.
If you really like it,
yeah, you get 12 more scenarios. Yeah, and I don't know if it comes with new units. I guess I haven't done my research on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Some of the old battle packs, some of them came with new expanded
new
units. Especially the Stalingrad one. There were a whole bunch of different things. So anyway, I love Combat Commander.
Yeah.
It's a delightful experience with a lot of randomness, a lot of chaos, which makes for an exquisitely difficult, challenging experience to do what you want to do.
Yeah, you always get a fun story out of it, usually. Yeah. That's the other aspect. We played this, and there were some very memorable moments.
Always
both
are.
Good and bad.
Yep. And it's also interesting, because tactically, if you look at this map, I wonder who you would say who would have won.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So it's interesting, but that wasn't the objective.
Yeah,
that wasn't the goal of the game.
You're fighting for objectives, you're also fighting against the clock as well.
You are. And it's such a great aspect, because how many times did I tell you, dude, just attack, because you're going to eat 8 cards of your deck.
But then I can't attack, I don't have the cards.
I know. But that's part of that strategy. When you're in the lead by 3, 4, 5, you don't want to piss around. You want to end this game.
Yeah, I'm trying to cut through my deck as quickly as possible.
Every attack you can take it. Because it doesn't matter. You're going to eat through cards. Every single attack you can do. Now, early on, don't do that. Because you need to take measured attacks. But that's why I love this game. That's why I love the system. I love the setup. I love how it plays. I love everything about it.
So,
that's my pick.
Combat Commander Pacific. We've played a ton of Combat Commander. This is going to get a big thumbs up from us anyway. Yes. Having played it and gotten to grips with some of the nuances, I like to be, I don't know, challenged with something I'm familiar with. Mm-hmm. And this gave us some new stuff that wasn't just surface level.
Right.
The changes that they've made really alter some ways you have to think about certain aspects of the game.
I think
I liked that.
Fundamentally, it altered some of those aspects of the game. So it wasn't like it was something out of the ordinary. It was really fundamental elements. The reviving versus the rallying, the way Melee changed, some of the new cards, Reconnoiter and Charge. I don't know, very cool. Yes. Very cool. So 2 thumbs up from me, definitely. That's for sure.
Combat Commander Pacific, Volume 3 of Combat Commander from GMT Games. You can get it. I would highly recommend it, because if it goes out of print again, good luck.
And that's just it. I remember...
It was like $130.
Oh, it was more than that. I remember seeing it for like $150, $175. We went to Origins, and I saw a copy, and I think it was $200. And I'm sitting there going, I love the game, but I wasn't going to spend $200 on one game. So... But yeah, anyway, get it before it goes out of print again, because
And if
it's that good.
If you've never played a tactical game, this isn't horribly, beginner unfriendly.
It's not overly complex.
No, it's more than probably a Euro game you've ever played.
Yes.
But for a tactical game, it's not terrible.
And to play it well, it's more about managing the stuff that you've got. I mean, it really is. Managing the units, managing the elements, creating fire groups, doing the things that are right, not taking risk unless you know you've got a good chance. So, yeah, I think anybody can play it. I really do.
Yeah, they have tournaments of this stuff at WBC. This is a massively popular game.
And I don't know why we haven't ever gotten involved in that because of our love for this game, but maybe we will.
I don't take myself that seriously.
Well,
that's really what it is.
Just because it would be fun. I just think it would be fun to get my butt kicked by somebody who actually understood Combat Commander way better than I did.
Playing it for like 20 years.
Yeah, right. So
I'm like, okay.
Anyway, great game. Great game.
It has a lot of staying power. Combat Commander Pacific from GMT. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I've been Alexander from theplayersaid.com.
And I'm Grant.